5 color principles that I wished I knew when I was starting out with watercolor. In my last video, I shared 5 tips I wished I knew when I was starting out with watercolor. Today, I'm going to share 5 color principles that I also wish I knew back when I started. In the classes and workshops I've taught in the last few years, I see these topics come up in different forms. Of course, I see myself in my students, so I thought I'd address 5 of the most common ones that remind me of my own journey. And if you stick around, I've got a bonus principle that I'll share with you. If you're still early in your own watercolor journey, grasping any of these concepts will save you a ton of time. Okay, let's get into them. Number 1, color temperature. Color temperature is basically the concept of warm colors and cool colors. First off, they're exactly what they sound like, sort of. Warm describes the colors you would associate with heat. Cool is those you associate with cold, sort of. If there's one thing you should get out of this part, it's that these concepts are relative. They're not absolute. I'll explain more in a bit. But back to the difference between warm and cool colors. You can identify warm and cool colors by looking at a color wheel. All the ones on this side are warm. All the ones on this side are cool. But that's the simplest explanation. You have to watch out because nothing about color temperature is absolute. While you can label a color as cool or warm, every color can lean in one direction or the other. So for an orange, while we can call it warm, it's still cooler than red. And a green, while it's a cool color, we can still say it's warmer than a blue. To help with identifying warm versus cool, the watercolor paint manufacturers have warm and cool ratings lists that you can consult. The Daniel Smith chart shows us which colors they've categorized as warm and cool. And I've also linked a Winsor Newton color temperature listing that Anthony from Watercolor Affair has posted. In the end, you have to treat these just as starting points because you have to remember, you also have to trust your eyes. Something that's categorized as warm may seem cool by comparison when you put it next to another paint that's even warmer. Just keep in mind that these distinctions are relative. They're almost meaningless without the context of multiple colors in a painting to make these comparisons. Number 2, atmospheric perspective. You may already know linear perspective, which is how lines converge at the vanishing point and help inform the angles of objects throughout a scene. Atmospheric or aerial perspective tells us how color behaves as we go from foreground to background. Cool colors recede, warm colors advance. You've probably heard that before. Things in the distance will also look lighter in value, less saturated, and softer in focus. Show this perspective in your paintings and you can instantly create a sense of depth. For instance, here in Uptown Manhattan, we have gorgeous views of the cliffs of New Jersey just across the Hudson River. It's about 1 mile across from our vantage point to the cliffs on the other side, while the river itself is just a little more than half a mile wide. So let's paint the greens in this view. We have some branches in the foreground and I'll paint some of the leaves. I'm using a sap green, which is very warm. And then how about the cliffs? Our brain tells us that it's covered in greenery, but if we paint it using the same sap green, something appears off. The river here is a little over half a mile wide, and if I paint both the cliffs and the foreground leaves using the same green, they look like they're on the same plane, equally close to the viewer. So how do we indicate that there's a half-mile wide river in between them? Watch what happens if I add some blue to cool down the greens across the river. The cooler green now makes that area recede and look further away. And remembering that things get lighter in value the further away they get from us, we can lift some of the paint to achieve this. At this point, the cool color and the lighter values make sense. Now, if I add some yellow to the foreground, it really helps to convey distance. Warm colors advance, cool colors recede. Understanding how to show atmospheric perspective will give your paintings depth. By the way, if you've learned something new so far, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you learn 2 or more things by the end of this video, would you consider subscribing to show your support? Let's keep going. Number 3, temperature is relative. Just before we get to my most elusive color principle in number 4, we have this notion that color temperature is relative by nature. Even warm and cool colors have warmer and cooler versions of themselves. You can have a warm red and a cool red, a warm yellow and a cool yellow. This is pretty mind-blowing, but once you see an example, it's obvious. Within a hue, you can find warmer and cooler versions. For example, in the red family, you can have warm or cool reds. You can test this by looking it up on the color wheel and figuring out whether it leans more toward blue or red. As a beginner, this required a bit more exposure than the other principles for it to sink in. But the breakthrough for me came from realizing that color temperature is relative and that it can serve us. I could choose a warmer or cooler version within a given hue family in order to accomplish a specific effect. Now, when I know that I need a certain color, I pause to think about what color temperature is it that I need. Going back to the sap green that I used in number 2, atmospheric perspective, let's say I've painted the tops of some trees, which are looking pretty warm because they're in the sunlight, but I need to show some of the darker areas that are in shadow. Well, to show some green leaves that are less exposed to the light, I should grab a green that is cooler. And so I can use perylene green, which has a bluish tint to it. This not only makes them recede in depth, remember, cool colors recede, but it will also give us convincing darks that make sense for the given subject. We can choose between a warmer one and a cooler one to accomplish what we need. So far, I've shared about color temperature, atmospheric perspective, and the relative nature of color temperature. Next, I'm going to share one of the most straightforward but elusive concepts that took me a while to grasp, but ever since I learned it, it's become one of the most powerful principles that I apply in every single painting. Let's keep going. Number 4, reach across for your complement. Honestly, this is the one that took me the longest to put into practice. This is the notion of using complementary colors to create darker shades like grays and even near blacks. This one was a challenge because I had to break deeply set routines. Every time I wanted to paint something dark, I would reach for my Payne's gray and I had to reprogram myself. When I wanted to show something in shadow, my default was to reach for a darker color like a black or a Payne's gray. The problem was that this would often feel unnaturally dark. Payne's gray has blue in it, so it will make something look darker, but if you use a little too much, then it could make it look unnaturally dark, even lifeless. This is even more true with black watercolor paint because it can block the light reflecting from the paper, which leaves it dull and flat, so it will stick out from the rest of your image. A great alternative is to use colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel. With these complementary colors, you can create a range of darks that have character and depth and retain the transparency that helps your painting to feel alive. When you have an apple, for example, and you want to show the shadow on one side of it, instead of taking black to create the dark side, find a way to keep using the red, but add a color across from it on the color wheel. This will neutralize it and help you achieve a dark color that harmonizes with the warmer red. Not only will this keep it from feeling lifeless, but it will also ring true to life, since even the darks we see around us have some warmth in them. So this concept was like going on a diet. The Payne's gray was my midnight snack, and I just couldn't help myself for the longest time. It's easy to look at the color wheel and you just reach for the complementary color that's opposite the one you're trying to darken. But you may have been eating that midnight snack for too long. Bad habits are hard to break. Now when I reach for Payne's gray, I typically reserve it for synthetic or man-made subjects that don't have much perceptible warmth like plastic or metal. If I'm working on something organic, really anything alive, then I try to avoid Payne's gray, especially if working on a portrait. And now we finally get to number 5. If you stick with me, you'll get a 6th bonus color principle too. Number 5 is glazing. The technique of glazing is one of the neatest ways we can approach colors with watercolor. But for me, it's also one of the easiest to forget to use intentionally. That's probably because it takes a bit more strategy and patience to apply it. It's not the quickest way to put down color on the paper. Glazing is when you put a very thin layer of color on the paper, and after it's completely dry, you add another thin layer of another color on top of it. This results in a mixed color which is optically different from just straight up mixing those colors first and applying it to the paper. With this method, we're actually creating colors by layering the components necessary for that color. This is why it requires a little bit more planning and of course time, because you need to wait for the initial layer to dry. To use this effectively, you decide ahead of time what color you want, and then deconstruct it to figure out the layers needed. So if we wanted to paint a grassy green field, we could either grab a sap green and put it down, which is the fastest way, or we could try glazing, putting down a thin layer of yellow and then a thin layer of blue over that to create the green. Glazing allows light to reflect off the paper through the colors, the layers, back to your eyes. And this helps to achieve luminosity, which is when we're allowing the white of the paper to pass through the hues of paint to produce a vibrant color. With glazing, time is on your side. You don't have to rush like when painting wet on wet. You have to wait for one layer to dry before putting down the second layer. There's not as much pressure to get it just right. You can do it methodically. Glazing is one of those techniques that we might inadvertently utilize, like when coming back to a painting a day later and then painting over a completely dry area. I wish I'd known earlier that there could be a proper strategy behind it. So we've just gone through the 5 color principles that I wish I'd known earlier. I promised a bonus color principle, but before that, if you've learned 2 things in this video, would you please hit subscribe? Subscribing will help me bring more videos like this to you for your enjoyment. And now for the bonus color principle. Number 6, the bonus, analogous colors. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. These colors go together and we can say they are harmonious. So if you use a palette of analogous colors and stick with those, you can create an entire painting out of them, and you can set yourself up for a pleasing and harmonious composition. I wish I knew about this concept of analogous colors sooner, because it really is a fun and useful technique for changing things up. Sometimes I don't necessarily feel like painting a scene using the colors from my reference photo. Using a palette of analogous colors allows me to set the mood by predetermining the range of colors that I'm going to use. And I can decide on a hue that will govern the tone of the piece, and everything will be centered around that hue. In this painting, I used a set of analogous colors focused around purple. This enabled me to convey a mood that wasn't there in the reference photo. While using analogous colors places a constraint on your palette, it also removes a certain amount of decision making. In that way, it becomes freeing. I encourage you to try this in your own work, and please do let me know in the comments how it turns out for you. Learning how to apply these 6 color principles can do wonders for your watercolor paintings. But even just adopting one of them into your routine can significantly improve your results. If you're new to watercolor painting, I've prepared a one-page chart of essential supplies to consider when getting started. Check out the link in the description below where you can download it for free. I'm Francis Shui. I'm a working artist based here in New York City. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe to show your support. From here, you can check out the last video where I talk about the 5 watercolor tips that I wish I'd known when I started. Until the next time, go and paint.